But when my son was born, like it was almost like a switch where like from what I thought was important was no longer important, what the priorities were no longer were, sensitivity and everything. Because for me, and it sounds like same with you, it shows you really what life is about, and what's important, and like that, and you know me well, that like angry like type person, like what's the point? Like it's not going to help anyone. Like why? Like
Yeah,
life
you're
is too short.
are you yeah, it doesn't seem like you've got any anger issues actually. You seem like the most composed, happy person and this is a different Garrett, bro.
Yeah, so
This is a
it's been
different G baby.
so it's been interesting. It's I still have those issues and like frustrations, but not only with my son, my wife, and realizing kind of what the big picture, as well as I don't know if I mentioned, I do microdosing, which helps a lot as well. I
Oh,
realized like at the end of the day, there's no point. Like, who's it going to benefit? Me being angry, me doing something like doesn't help anyone. There's no good outcome of it. So at the end of the day, we're all connected. We're all the same energies and spirits here on this earth. We're all one. So why treat anyone like shit? There's no point.
dude, this is so cool. So I hit the live stream button and we just got
Oh,
we're rocking already, bro. I love this. This is so great. For the folks who don't know who I'm talking to, this is a good friend of mine. I've known him for over 20 years. I was like 14 or 15 when I met him. He was a year older. I guess you are still a year older than me.
yeah.
That doesn't change, does it? So,
No.
and I've looked up to him all of my life. He was always the business guy coming up in school. He was always the guy who you knew would be successful and always just pushed past any adversity that I ever saw him go through. So this guy, I get chills talking about it because I think you're one of my longest like friends or something, like the person I've known for a while. And it's
Wow.
just amazing to see such a crazy transition when you see someone at 14 or 15 years old, that whatever you are, 37, 38 years old.
Yeah, 37.
So dude, thank you for coming here. I guess this
Of
is
course.
my thank you.
No,
Um,
listen, but before you even kick off, I appreciate what you said. It means a lot, but that feeling is mutual because I know how we once were in high school and in middle school, which um, is still amazing to me. We are not in more trouble and alive um, for the most part. But even when you used to come here and hearing what you've been doing, that true entrepreneurship grind and struggle, finding that fire from within and growing. I mean, you're the definition of an entrepreneur, my friend. Like I really admire all you do.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot for sure, especially coming from you, man. For the folks who don't know who you are, can you kind of give us a little background of like what you do professionally and
Sure.
what you help folks with and all that cool stuff?
Sure. So my 9 to 5 job, I work as a managing director at a family office slash private equity group hybrid here in Miami, Florida. It's a small group. It's very kind of family oriented, like family style teamwork and operations. I lead specifically all investor relations, which include capital raising, include investor sourcing, the networking, as well as deal sourcing and deal origination. And then once we find a deal, I will also lead and take on the leadership of the service management teams for the due diligence. So essentially the accounting firms, the lawyers that come in, I'll oversee them. I'll make sure they're hitting the proper items that they're supposed to on their actionable list, their scope of work. And I'll take it all the way along with the chairman and the other partners to not only doing the due diligence, raising the capital, but as well as the deal structuring. Where my job ends is post investment for the most part. On the operational side, I don't handle that. That's our post acquisition team. They really run the operations. What I do post acquisition is really the investor management side of things. So making sure everything's being communicated properly, positioned with all of our investors and keeping them updated and into the like loop and status of where the deal's at.
What kind of like deals are you guys looking for? Because I know you had like a soccer team at one point. I don't know if you guys still do or not, but like you're working with all different types of people. Yeah, what kind of people do you work with? Like who are you looking for primarily?
So it's interesting. Most private equity groups and family offices typically go the fund route, and the fund route, for those who don't know, means essentially having a pool of dedicated capital that they've raised from either some family money, but co-investors, institutions, banks, groups like that. And it allows you to execute on a deal quicker, which is great. The downside of that is you have certain limitations and restrictions as to the type of investments you can go into, whether it be amount of debt, but more specifically, it generally has to do with the industry you are focused in. So most groups that have a fund will focus in on where they have a track record. So if someone is really good at real estate and they've raised a fund, once that fund closes, all they could focus in is on real estate. They couldn't per se go look at a venture deal or a banking deal or anything else because they have the confounds. What our group does, and is the reason we don't have a fund, is we are very opportunistic in nature. So that allows us to look across various industries, different verticals to really operate on deals. And to give you some color, what we've done is in the early 2000s, we were the second largest franchisee of Burger King in the United States. We have about 1,000 cell phone towers in Brazil. We owned Ripley's, believe it or not, in Times Square. We resurrected Eastern Airlines. We owned a few hotels. And more recently, like I would say a year before the pandemic, we co-founded a single family rental platform, which right place, right time, pandemic hit. Our group seeded it with roughly $100 million. Right place, right time. Everyone fled from the cities, went to kind of the Florida, East Coast smile states, and we crushed it. So that has its own team. You fast forward to today, it's now backed by a sovereign wealth fund. They have about $1.2 billion that they're able to deploy. They have 2,000 homes in sub a year and a half. They're murdering it for all intents and purposes. Additionally, about 2 years prior to the pandemic, we saw kind of a void in the market. And that void was really due to selling multiples of sports teams, in specific soccer, football. So what we did was we started vetting specifically European deals where there was kind of a mismatch on valuation. And we ended up acquiring a French team called Bordeaux FC, which is a wild experience and kind of thing that took place, because it's not just finance and operations you're dealing with. You're dealing with the politics, the hooligan fans, the fans, everything in its mother, which is challenging. And you're truly in the spotlight, which I know some people say there's no press, that's bad press. But when you have fans telling you how they believe you should run the club with your money, it gets hostile. And it's not always the best situation to be in. We dodged a pretty massive bullet where about 3 weeks before the pandemic was ever announced or anyone heard of anything, we offered to buy out our co-investor. They offered to buy us out. It went back and forth for a while. And then literally 2 weeks before pandemic, they gave us an offer we couldn't refuse, because as an investor, we had our co-investors, so we're fiduciaries. We have to make sure we're doing the right thing with people's money and not in just our benefit. Sure. So we made a tremendous return, well over 50% in over a year and a half ownership. 2 weeks later, the pandemic is announced, and everyone knows what happened there. Sports in particular went to hell in a handbasket. It went from making money to losing roughly 5 million euros a month. It was a bloodbath. All that being said, it kind of shows that we're very opportunistic in nature. And not only not having a fund enables that, but we believe that providing capital is one thing. The real value add is bringing the strategic side of things in relationships to really enhance the value. And that's never more true in today's environment, especially. So for us, we're able to look at any industry as long as we know enough to be dangerous. And equally as important, we have either consultants or people in our network that are the experts in that field to allow us to really grow strategically that opportunity, whatever it is.
So let's talk a little bit about your network, because you started like blowing up. It seemed, I mean, you've been doing amazing things, but it almost seemed like you're like the behind the scenes guy that was like doing all the fucking moves. And over the last maybe year or so, I've seen you like being promoted by my buddy Jonathan Foltz and Stephen Georgie, and like you're going to be doing all this cool stuff with them. How did you get into this network, man? Because that seems like a totally, you know, the marketing crypto world is very different from where I think where you are coming from. How did this come together, man?
It's literally like oil and water. Private equity finance guys, do not go into the venture realm. It's a very different way of thinking. The venture guys are more, and there's nothing wrong with this, pie in the sky, deploy capital into 100 deals. If 2 hit and they make it, you make your year and numbers tenfold. The private equity guys are a little more methodical, a little more conservative, and look at a later stage of investment. Honestly, how I got into that group was you.
Let's go. I didn't expect that answer. Fuck
was
yeah.
you, because you had introduced me to Albert. You had also introduced me at one point to Jonathan. Albert reconnected me to Jonathan. You had introduced me to another gentleman. Who I can't remember. He like lived in Latin America or disappeared or some shit.
I don't even know.
And we just stay connected. And it's been years of having met and known them. They were more acquaintances. But over time, Jonathan, especially being in Miami, he's an interesting individual. He's very much like yourself. He's an entrepreneur. He's a dreamer. And he thinks big, not in the sense of how much money can I make, more in the sense of how can I disrupt and impact things globally. And that resonated with me. So literally when he kicked off his NFT project, Legionnaires, we met for lunch and we'd already been talking about how can I help you? What can I do to add value? Because truly, it's all about not just your job. Jobs are great, they keep the lights on, but it's everything else that you generate wealth. And not knowing what those around you are doing is like the biggest missed opportunity. No different than if you don't know what your competitor is doing or a friend's doing, you're missing opportunities. And we literally sat down for lunch, and I ended up buying this bloody NFT for $5,000 in like 30 minutes out of nowhere. Not because I understand NFTs or technology or anything. Because
so you're the guy to pitch. You're the guy to pitch.
I'm the guy to pitch. But it wasn't
a lay down deal.
It wasn't just the NFT or tech side, because I know nothing of it. What sparked my interest, and you'll resonate with this, was the network and high caliber of individuals they were bringing together. Because in my mind, my whole value is my network and what I could bring to the table with that network, as well as my skill set, but it's more network.
Right.
So if I'm able to generate good relationships within that high quality group, that'll pay 100-fold of whatever I paid to get in. And the deals and the relationships that come from it, you can't even put a price on it. It's exponential. So that's how I even got into it. And then it just kind of started having this snowball effect. And now, I mean, as recent as yesterday, we were talking about how to take things to the next step and really how to grow things, which is what it's all about at the end of the day.
So when you're speaking on stage, or when you're going to be speaking, I know you've got something coming up, I think, if it hasn't happened already. What kind of stuff are you guys getting, or what are you going to be talking about on there?
So it was interesting. I believe it took place this past Monday, and it's funny because I'm an introvert by nature.
I had no way, bro. No way.
I am a pure introvert by nature.
Not at 14, you weren't, bro. Throwing
no,
those
not
parties,
at 14. That was a different animal. That was the Dark Ages.
This is jeez.
So it's interesting. With that panel in particular, it was a great group. The Legionnaires and Jonathan put together a great 3-day event. I came for that Monday to speak on the panel. And it was really 3 individuals, including myself, about where are we at in the economy today? What is the state of finance? How does capital raising look like? Where are the big issues that we see? Because you're, for the most part, in a room filled with some finance people, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs and venture capital people. And since the pandemic, the world that we once knew no longer exists. So they wanted to understand the private equity family office guys' standpoint of what we see. And the other individuals were an individual from a serial entrepreneur from the real estate space who now has her own foundation, and a gentleman from the public market side, all of which, thanks to the pandemic and technology, has shifted dramatically. It's no longer what we thought it was or what it used to be. Everything has changed completely.
What are some things, if you can point it out, like that are like clearly different?
Perfect. So from a capital raising standpoint, everyone is now going more back to basics. That whole, I have an idea on a piece of paper, it's worth 50 million, that doesn't exist anymore. It's more of understanding the operational side of things. Pre-pandemic, the way at least the private equity guys would really look at a deal is, how much leverage or debt can I take on before I close on a deal that it can withstand? And how do I essentially manipulate the balance sheet? So kind of the making sure that everything is aligned structurally. Post, and as a result of the pandemic, with the Fed rates going up, debt costing a lot more, interest rates going up, it's no longer focused on how much debt can I put on. People are looking at it more of how can I creatively structure this deal so that it not only makes sense and I can make money as long as you have the right path, but it's more of now a look at the operational side. Playing with the balance sheet no longer exists. It's now how do you play with the operational side, such as the revenues, expenses, and how do you add value? Because that pipe dream type opportunity where you're kind of rolling the dice and hoping for the best to hit a grand slam doesn't exist. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We have no idea if a recession is going to hit or anything. All we do know is inflation's rising, interest rates are rising, and there's been various instances, particularly in the venture space with Silicon Valley, Singular, and all these other banks that are imploding that force you to look more conservatively. And the reason they imploded largely was due to that prior mentality, which is paying high multiples with high valuations, spending money without even thinking about the expense side. So they were literally spending money to keep growing the revenue side while the expense side was still making them at a loss all day. That no longer exists. It doesn't happen anymore. Well, it does, but not in the same manner. It's much more conservative. The other really interesting thing that I think has taken place is the new investor class that has evolved, which primarily pre-pandemic, for the most part, institutions, banks, all these groups, private equity groups included, would raise money from large family offices, institutions, all these different groups, which are a high tier investor. As a result of the pandemic, and it kind of all kicked off with this whole Reddit army, AMC, GameStop stuff, and as well as crypto, with all these crypto millionaires evolving, it was shown that the accredited investor class and retail class, which are people that can typically invest between 5,000 to 100,000, maybe a little more, are willing and able and want to invest in the alternative and private markets group and investments. So that's more private style deals. All of these big institutions and all these groups, no one has ever focused on that tier of investor, which is a big problem because the family offices and all these big groups have all of these great opportunities with managers, private deals that cost them 25, 30 million to get into. But an accredited investor or retail investor would never get that opportunity to get into it. So when people talk about the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and all of that, that is largely why, because the middle to lower class people do not have that opportunity, the same opportunities that these bigger groups have. So that tier of investor has really evolved to create what many groups are calling the new virgin territory, because that is a new class that nobody has tapped into. And when you research it, and the reason I know this is because we created a company to focus purely on this group and tier, that just in the United States alone, there's $18.5 trillion of accredited investor capital sitting on the sidelines. Globally, it's 34.5. That is a lot of money that is looking and want to get in. So if you're able to find the solution to that problem or tap into that market base, it's still early, so there's obviously a gamble, it's not proven, but if you hit it and you become the thought leader and really hit it right, I mean, you'll be the next 800-pound gorilla overnight. It's incredible.
Wow. You know, one thing I've started noticing, and maybe you can speak a little bit on this. It seems like a lot of my friends who have e-commerce stores have been selling them for ridiculous amounts of money. Is that part of this like new thing we're entering into? Is that becoming more normal? Like, what do you look for? I mean, I guess I'm hitting you with a few questions there, but it seems so cool. What do you look for? How can people start kind of building their companies to be sold, I guess, in this e-commerce space?
Right. So although our firm does not focus on e-com, the commonality between both of our realms and what people are focusing on now is cash flow. And e-com stores generally generate a lot of cash flow with minimal work, not minimal, there's teams, but it's not as dependent as a brick and mortar or any other thing like that. you're able to do it with a smaller team, less expense, theoretically, and generate a lot of money. So what has evolved is not only the tighter look at the companies and the operational side, is really the cash flow side of things. And if you're generating cash flow in today's environment, I mean, you have a gold coin in your hand, or unicorn in your hand.
Wow.
In the sense of, when you look at all these other venture groups, VC groups, and other type companies that are startups, and you know this well, their goal in the beginning, pre-pandemic, or even in the beginning, was pump that revenue as high as you can. And as long as it's growing and your growth is still happening, you could raise a ton of money, and it doesn't matter that you're losing a shit ton of money at the bottom line. Now, in today's environment, with the credit market being the way it is, an uncertainty, no longer are those moves happening, which sucks for them, creates an opportunity for groups that have cash and want to break in, and then makes those who are generating positive cash flow king, because that's an easy way to sustain and show returns without doing a ton of work behind it. And that's no different than our group. If there's a way or path to sustain and maintain profitability where it's throwing off money, you're in a good spot. You're in a really good spot, because then you could either strategically grow or grow through additional investment. And once you lock down really the science or methodology of how to generate money, you just scale it. It's just the same in e-com as well.
What are some of your plans, man, coming up? Because like I said, you used to be like in the shadows, and now you're no longer, you're out there like moving and grooving and shit. Like what are some of your plans coming up, man? Do you have any?
So from a high level perspective, I haven't set specific plans. I'm very happy where I'm at. I'll continue to grow with this group, and I like where I'm at. From a big picture standpoint, this whole pandemic really shifted my mindset of what I need to do and what I need to be for not only my family, but my business and myself as well. And realistically, if you do not have a number of revenue streams going on at any point in time, you're in a tough spot. Because when you look at what's been happening, all these major banks, tech companies, any type of company, not only when the pandemic hit, many of them shut things down, people lost their jobs. But even when you fast forward to today, there's tremendous layoffs happening. And at the end of the day, if I don't protect my family and myself, there's no one else to blame but me. It's all me. I need to be the superhero of my own story. There's no one I can point a finger at and blame. So really what I've done is really started focusing, rather than on helping everybody with the problems that they have, which I still do, it's now more focused on how do I build and add value to my network and continue to grow it. And part of that is getting exposure. And that's what it's really about, because as long as I can come off, it's no different than people in the e-com space as a problem solver, a guru, a thought leader. People will start looking to you. And rather than having to pull people to me or drag them to me, they'll come to me naturally. And that makes life a lot easier. That's
smart, man. I love it. Kind of shifting a little bit, maybe not so much on the business side. You said something really interesting right when we like started. I don't know if we hit it on the live. We were talking about like our kids and all that stuff. But you mentioned something about microdosing. So I have not had, I've tried this 3 times. I've microdosed, maybe a little macro on the side dosed. I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or what. It's been giving me a little tummy ache. What are you using microdosing for? How is it helping you? Like, can you kind of just shine some light on it? Because I'm so curious about it.
Absolutely. So it's fascinating, because no different than cannabis, even alcohol, various other things that were taboo, it's now becoming in the spotlight of our government, different investment groups and alternative groups. And it's typically, at least what I do, it's mushrooms. So it's mushrooms that have kind of a hallucinogenic effect to it that really, there's 2 different ways of looking at it. There's, as you and I have both done, the party route, which it wasn't intended for.
Right.
And then there's the scientific health side of things, which if you really dig into what microdosing is and what it does, it basically recreates and rebuilds the brain synapses and nerves and everything that have died or been damaged in your mind slowly. So there's a great documentary. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you see it, called Fantastic Fungi. It's on Netflix.
Fantastic fungi.
Fungi, and it's really eye-opening for everything, and kind of taking a quick snapshot of what it does. So for me, when I first stumbled across it, and this was probably 3 years ago or so, I suffered from a lot of anxiety, stress, just uncertainness, confidence about myself, and really was just unsure. And I had the mindset of fake it till you make it, which is
What a
fine,
lot of people do.
like the majority of people,
Everyone, yeah.
because you wear these bloody masks in society to try to pretend to be something. And all you're doing is really damaging yourself and not being who you truly are, which at the end of the day, you need to be, because that's what attracts other people and really shows you which relationships you should be in tune with and spend time with. So when I had started and been introduced to it, so I've been doing it for about 3 years now. Generally, the rule of thumb I've told other people who are starting, you do it 1 day on, 2 days off, and you need a minimum of 3 months of consistency for you to really say, wow, this is where I came from. This is where I was at. Here I am now. And it's such a small dose. It's well beneath the threshold of hallucinating. So it's almost like taking a vitamin. You shouldn't feel, see, or feel any different when you take it. And what happened with me is around that 2.5 month mark, I realized that things that used to bother me or get me anxious, or problems that I had, for whatever reason, were no longer doing it. And when I really looked back and started understanding and mapping things, it's largely due to the power of that mushroom. And I'm a believer that Mother Earth has really put everything we need on this planet to help heal us, do whatever we need to do. It's all here. It's just politics and capitalism that's really shielding it and keeping it away. And what I started to realize is that, for example, if I was in the midst of a capital raise and an investor did not want to go forward, prior to that, I would say I screwed up, I did something wrong, and go into like a state of panic. Right. Now I look at it and I'm able to stop those thoughts from actually happening, pull myself out and say, this is a blip in the radar, has nothing to do with me, and it is okay, and change that entire shift. And it's really a beautiful thing. And in that documentary, you'll see they did macro dose monitored sessions with therapists and doctors for people that were terminally ill, that were petrified of dying. And after 1 or 2 sessions, you see that they went from being mortified, scared, anxious, and everything towards the end of their life when they know they're going to die, to literally crying and being happy and at peace, because they know that we're all connected and it'll be okay. Everyone will be okay when you're gone, and we'll all reunite in one way, shape, or form later on in time. So it's a powerful thing. And we're in the early stages, which is fascinating of everything. But I think personally, this is going to be the future of therapy. And I had done therapy for years and years and years and years. And what I can honestly say is, through my microdose journey, what I have gotten and solved and fixed and grown from to where I am today in 1 year of microdosing is more than all the therapy I ever did in my entire life.
I can tell. I didn't know you were microdosing. I can just see it. I can feel it, the conversation, the energy. It's like a new you. It's like the ultimate evolved Garrett or something. Because I still remember you, obviously, from like a long time ago. And it's really cool to see the transition, man. And so when you brought that up, I was like, you're not the only guy who I know has talked about this and like talked in like a positive tone about how it's helped them. And you're also not the only guy who said you should not just do it like I did once, twice, 3 times sporadically over like a 1 year period. They're like, it's kind of got to be a consistent thing, or just don't even waste your time.
Absolutely.
That's so fascinating to me, because I've seen it. So that's why I'm like, I can see it happening. It piques my curiosity more. One of my buddies I played poker with, or I used to, he actually moved. My buddy Hodge, he's a scientist. I don't know what the official scientific term of his scientist thing is, but he's in a lab, and what he studies is like psilocybin and mushrooms and all this stuff. And I want to say he's like in Wisconsin. It's like all legitimate. It's like this whole, like they're doing tons of studies on this. And he even said, he's like, dude, this is going to blow up, man. This is going to blow up.
Oh, absolutely. It's similar with kind of cannabis, in the sense of the government and everyone was against it until they figured out a way to make money on it. In this sense, it's more the medical community and trying to figure out not only those who are opposed to it, but how they make money on it. But from a pure scientific benefit standpoint, this is going to disrupt everything. And I truly believe this will be the future of therapy and really helping people, because at the end of the day, we all have problems. We just don't want to admit it. And more times than not, we all walk on similar paths and cross paths with people that are going through the same thing. And whatever religion you believe in, we were not meant to be that way. We were meant to be a community and happy and loving one another. And I believe that if everybody was on this path and kind of dropped those veils, we would be in a much better place any way you look at it, in all respects.
Are you looking at any companies that like are involved in that?
So there's a lot taking place in Miami, and some great trailblazers, that as well as ketamine, which is more of the chemical route. So there's a lot of exciting things happening. For our group in particular, it's still in that like taboo realm because it's not federally regulated. People are still figuring it out. There's a big unknown, and no different than any other investor group, when it's in that kind of grayish realm, no different than cannabis, firearms, alcohol. It's a very specific type of individual who really focuses on it, and it has an impact on your brand and reputation. So our group isn't focused on it yet, but I would imagine if there is a shift and it goes more federal and things start coming out, I think that's going to be the next gold rush. Personally, I really do.
I could totally see it. I've seen it slowly in the marketing space, kind of like fake mushrooms. I don't know what they are, but they're kind of trying to dabble into it. And I've seen it. Dude, thank you so much, Mr. Garrett Navia. Thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate this. This is such a cool talk. We got to talk a little bit about some business stuff, some finance stuff, some mushrooms. It's a great podcast, man. I loved it. Where can people find you, man, if they want to connect with you and learn more about you and all that stuff? Where can they do that?
They could do it either on LinkedIn, which I will send you that, cool. Or you could just provide my phone number and email address. I'm always available. I love learning about what other people are doing, because that's what it's about, helping one another and having an impact and disrupting the world as we know it. We're at a very exciting time where I think in more ways than we even can imagine, there's going to be a lot of different disruptions and really revolutions taking place. We're at a fascinating time. So I'm excited, and thank you. More importantly, it's truly an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, man. So real quick before we hop off, what's the best number and the best email for them to reach you at?
My personal mobile phone number, which is 305-213-9438. And then I'll give my personal email, so my work email doesn't get flooded, which is GNA, V as in Victor, IA at La Familia, FAMILIA advisors.com.
Perfect. And also that number hasn't changed in like 20 something years.
No, man, I got to keep the 305 number.
I'm like, I remember the 213. So, all right,
Absolutely.
man. Thank you so much, guys. Make sure you link up with him, add him on the social medias, the LinkedIns, the Facebooks, hit him up in email and telephone. Definitely a guy you want to have in your contact base. And thanks again, man. I'm excited to do this again.